So guys, yes, this is Katherine. Another Katherine. Yeah, Katherine is a professional declutterer and tidier and, did you say interior redesigner? Is that?
I call it interior redesign, yes.
I like it.
Yeah.
So I'll let you crack on, Katherine. But yeah, following on from what Belinda was saying on Thursday, this is a really nice thing to get your teeth into right now.
Indeed. Okay, well, thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to be here this evening. So tonight I thought we could just have a light-hearted look at how we're using our spaces and some suggestions and tricks as to what we might be able to do with them to help improve. And obviously I'm starting to get to know a few of you with the little chit chat that we started with, so that's great. I'm Katherine. I own Sort My Space and I'm based in southeast London, so I'm just up the road from you. I'm in Bermondsey. And I'm also the president of APDO, which is the Association of Professional Declutterers and Organisers. There are a few other freaks like me. We've got about 380 members now across the UK and beyond. And I'm also the first person to qualify as a certified professional organiser with a Z from North America last summer. So I'm the first person in the UK to get that accreditation. However, that said, tonight, I'd like to be your ally, okay? As I was just confessing to Ian and Sally, there are two types of organisers, professional organisers. There are the people who are born organised and they literally come out of the womb and start organising their changing stations and arranging nappies and things right from the get-go. And there are others who struggle with organisation and decide that they need to create systems to support them in their everyday living. Otherwise, they're going to be battling with themselves their entire lives. And I definitely fall into the latter category. So I am not a naturally tidy person. It can look like a bomb's gone off. When I was at university, we had an affectionate box called the Cath box. And with my housemates, my 5 other housemates, every time I kind of walked through and did a Hansel and Gretel display through the house, they would throw stuff in the Cath box to get it back to my room. So that gives you the scene as to how I kind of started getting very interested in this, and I actually made it into a career. Some of the things that I will say tonight might appear like common sense, but I have been finding that common sense isn't always that common, for a start. And also the other thing is that even when we know what we could or should be doing, those can be strong words, but even if we know what would help us out, we don't always necessarily remember to apply the theories. And I also fall prey to this myself as well. So what I want to recognize is that you are all competent, successful beings in your own fields. And I'm here tonight as an ally and not as any kind of, Wonder Woman who's going to wave a magic wand and do a Mary Poppins and make everything suddenly perfect. Okay, it doesn't quite work like that. We do have to put in a bit of grit and graft. And I'm sure if you guys are all turning up at the gym and have engaged personal trainers, you know the score on that front. So having a bit of investment and time invested in kind of getting systems in place can seem tedious or laborious or hard work to start with if it's not something that naturally excites you, but actually it can pay off and reap the dividends over time. So I would like to go through it this evening, give you some tips and tricks. As I say, I'm here as an ally, as an equal, and what I'm hoping for is for you to all come away with at least one golden nugget, if not plenty, of something that you can actually take away and affect or change or tweak at home with your home environments, because we are now spending so much more time in them. So if you have pen and paper to hand, if you're a kind of retro kind of person like I am, or if you've got your mobile phone for jotting any notes, as things kind of spark off or ignite as you go along, if you want to jot them down, that would be great. So let me just start sharing the screen. There we go. So I think we're good to go on that. Let me just, sorry, I was saying I'm just getting used to the technology because I've changed things around with my own setup now. Now I've actually got a garden office that's not full of building supplies. So, right, okay. Let's click through. There we go. Okay. So to start things, I'd like to introduce you to this quote that actually changed my life. I used to be a project manager and I quit my role in the city back in 2014. And I decided to refurbish my house. That was the 2015 refurbishment. It's gone through another whole iteration now, 5 years later. I will learn one day. And I was staying with a friend on the sofa surfing while I was escaping most of the dust and debris. And this quote from William Morris came up. She'd left an article lying out from the London Minimalist group. And it said, have nothing in your houses that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. And little did I know at that point in time that this quote would start shaping the way I dealt with my own refurbishment. And as Sarah said, kind of, you know, she's got this opportunity now, new space, and Vicky, you're in the throes of it as well. Actually, having a quote like this really, really shaped how I approached my refurbishment. And instead of automatically replacing things because I'd had one of those before, I questioned, do I still need it? Is it adding any value? Does it actually, for coining an expression from Marie Kondo, the Japanese decluttering expert, does it spark joy? So this quote actually really shaped the way I dealt with my refurbishment, and little did I know at the time it was actually going to shape what I decided to then do as a career, having quit my job in the city. So I think it's quite a powerful quote, and it does help you when you're making, you know, decisions on that. So what I want to double check is kind of in the spirit of Greenwich training being a safe and supportive environment, I'd like to suggest that we have a rule tonight that anything that's shared tonight we do with non-judgment, and there's complete confidence in that we're providing this supportive setup, shall we say, and system. The way I refer to it is if, you know, anything you say in shit club stays in shit club, okay? So if we're all okay with that, can I see a wave of hands that everybody's okay with that? Okay, brilliant. And then to test this theory and see that you really, really are on board, what I would like to do is ask you to, it's a bit of a, you know, personal and potentially embarrassing question, but how many people on the call have actually suffered from very painful, intolerable piles?
Yeah, often my...
Yeah.
Okay, now I normally get a bigger wave of hands because actually I haven't at any point mentioned I have a medical background or any kind of qualifications in that field. So most people are admitting that they actually have piles of maybe paperwork, maybe toys, maybe clothes, or maybe, and this one's my personal issue, things to do, piles of things to do. Now, do we have a few more people on the call that would like to admit and nod and wave to those kind of piles? Yeah. All right. You're in the right place then. So what we'll do is quickly go through some of these categories, see if any of them resonate. And as I say, if you find your golden nuggets, do jot them down. That would be great. All right. Dealing with piles of paperwork. Go for the quick wins. Initially, you're just trying to get rid of the bulk, okay? So anything that is like catalogs, magazines that you're not going to read or you've read and kind of can dispose of them, try and thin down. When you're dealt with have rounded up your paperwork and you're dealt with a big pile, remove the bulk first and foremost, okay? If you've got assembly instructions and so on, double check. The majority of them are online should you ever need them, so you don't need to keep hold of assembly instructions. Most warranties and guarantees are only 1 or 2 years. Again, if you didn't register them to start with, they're unlikely to support you at this point in time, so you can ditch those as well. The other trick I would say is when you come across a stack of paperwork, flip it upside down. The reason being is that actually the oldest stuff is likely to be at the bottom, and it might be easier to let go of the oldest stuff first because it will have expired or it's been in that pile for so long you realize that it's not adding any value. So that's another quick win. Initially, simply do keep and ditch. Just, you want to be going as fast as possible. And the other thing, again, a bit like working out, you need to kind of reward yourself along the way. So kind of, even if you take a big stack and you've thinned it out of the bulk stuff, you've turned it upside down, and you've just done a simple keep and ditch and you've had enough for today, that's fine. Celebrate that however you do. I did do this talk at one point and somebody said, oh, I celebrate with gin and tonic. And we realized that kind of they were going to get rather hammered through the process if you do it every time you meet a landmark. But however you like to reward yourself. If you've only got the attention to kind of an enthusiasm to just do this to start with, you've at least made it more manageable as a project. You can, as I say, review the keep papers later and then further subdivide them. What I'd also recommend is, when it comes to storing the stuff that you need to keep, what I found with myself as well as the majority of my clients, that humans naturally have a tendency that anything that is a couple of steps to do is a deterrent, and we get put off even starting. So what I found works much better, rather than having lever arch files where you've got to then make sure you know where the hole punch is and you've got to hole punch and pop it in and open things and all the rest of it, is actually having open, almost like filing cabinets or open storage that you can put broad categories into. You're more likely to toss something into an open folder or a magazine file like you can see I've got here. You're more likely to get it into a rough zone should you need to refer to it and when you need to refer to it. So that's that one. Next thing I'd say is don't overclassify. If you've got a folder or a section in a drop down section and it's car stuff, that is probably going to be all right for how often you actually ever need to look up. Your car insurance is usually once a year, or if you have a prang in the meantime. It's your MOT, once you've got it, you very rarely actually need it until you go to sell the vehicle and so on. So actually try not to get too worried about the classifications and doing it in too many subcategories. Otherwise you'll actually spend longer maintaining the system than you will for the odd chance that you actually need to look up a certain document. So even if you get things into broad categories, you've still got an idea, and anybody else in the house that might need to refer to it can actually find the things as well. You can go to the level of classifying things in chronological order, alphabetical order, and so on. You may find that with certain categories, at least, it doesn't warrant the time spent on doing that, and it may put you off even doing your filing. Again, when you're creating your space, your working environment, and where you need things, keeping things active are the ones that need some action doing on them, or that you refer to on a regular basis. Some of the stuff, the reference stuff, can be much further away, especially if it's things that you don't think that you're going to need to refer to. So again, think about your sort of within your reach on your desk, and if your desk or your office space or kind of wherever you do your life and house admin, try to have things within an arm's reach if it's going to be stuff that you're using regularly. And a lot of people find it quite useful to color code by theme or activity. So for example, I have sort of 3 hats that I wear. I have my personal life, I have my business, running my business, and I have my volunteer hat for the Association of Professional Declutterers and Organisers. So I actually have them color coded. I have them color coded in my diary, so I can check that I've got a work-life balance. Kind of if it's starting to topple too heavy in yellow, that means I'm doing too much volunteering compared to how much I'm doing for my business or my personal life. And then I also have, I have the same color schemes. I don't know if it'll actually show on here. This is my to-do files, so keeping things handy and within reach of my desk. So again, they're color coded, so I know when I've got my brain in a certain mode, I can actually easily zone in on what I need to support that particular activity. All right, how many parents in the room? I know that Sally and Ian, have you got any others? Not immediately, okay. So I'll go through these piles of toys, and if I go through too quickly, guys, you can have a chat with me afterwards, no problem. So what I'd recommend is considering having play zones for different activities, so that you actually can have a kind of an arts and crafts area, or a box that contains the arts and crafts stuff that can be pulled out onto the dining table when it's that time and easily packed away. If you've got a storage container, you're more likely, and this applies whether it's toys or anything else, you can have this in your kitchen, for example, for jars and like jars of jam and spreads and so on. If you're in toast mode, you pull one box down, you deal with it, and then you've got one item to put back, rather than having 16 different jars or bottles of crafts, glue and paints and so on. Open top and shallow storage works best for kids, little kids and big kids alike, as it happens. If you don't have the deterrent of having to lift a lid to put stuff into it, you're more likely, as I say, to toss stuff in to where it rightfully belongs, so you can stay on top of things a little easier along the way. And shallow storage actually works really well for stimulating imagination. This applies if any of you are crafters. I remember overclassifying my scrapbooking supplies kind of years ago, and it actually stifled my creativity because I had to open too many little mini boxes rather than rifling through and looking for inspiration. And the same with toys, in terms of the kids' imaginations and playing opportunities. I would recommend keeping categories very broad, so people and animals and transport. I did work with a client, and she had actually categorized down to such a level and was getting very upset that the kids and her husband and the grandparents and the nanny weren't adhering to the system. But we were down to like rocket ships and submarines, and she had boxes and labels. It was beautiful, but it wasn't a maintainable system. So I think you have to be realistic with the household that you're in, and if not everyone's going to be on board, keep it very broad. And the other thing I would say is have picture labels as well, because pictures speak 1,000 words. And from a very young age, if you've got the words and some example pictures on the boxes, then kids can adhere to it. And if you have any language barriers, because this lady also had a nanny who was Mexican and was struggling to kind of understand all of the finer details on some of these labels. Toy rotation is actually what we touched on, Ian, when you mentioned about moving stuff out of circulation. So this is actually a kind of a good technique to do. If you are limited on space, don't have absolutely all of the toys down at kind of what I'll call prime property level. So actually rotate things around. You can actually pop things kind of either up on top of cupboards in lofts or garages if you have those luxuries available. And you can have things out of sight, out of mind. What this does is, one, it does test whether these items are needed or not. And this can apply again for big kids' toys too. But also what it does is create a stimulus when it's brought back into circulation. It's got that slight novelty and new factor. So actually it re-excites you in that process. I have already got a decluttered wardrobe, but when I worked with a local lady who does House of Colours, about a consultation kind of for which colours suit you and so on, she actually said, well, you should have a winter and a summer and a winter wardrobe. I said, why do I need to bother? I can fit all of my year's supply into this one wardrobe. And that's great, because otherwise I've got to give myself new extra tasks twice a year to rotate stuff around. And she said, well, I hear that. She said, and I can see why you would have opted not to do that, because again, path of least resistance, try and make my life easier. But she said, you'll actually, when you get those clothes back down after 6 months, you haven't seen them for 6 months, you know you love them, and actually you'll get that excitement again. It's a bit like going shopping but without the outlay. I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it, because I'd been recommending this to my clients for their kids, and I hadn't realized that there's a big kid in me and that I would respond in the same way. So it's just an idea, kind of. It doesn't always have to be based on you being limited on space. Obviously that tends to be the driving force, but actually you can actually rotate these toys. And the other thing is popping a little bit when you're putting stuff out of circulation. Put a bit of masking tape on with the date, and pop it into the loft or up at the top cupboard. And if you pull that down after a year or two and the masking tape hasn't been damaged, hasn't been pulled off, you know you haven't used those items since today's date. So it gives you a way of measuring whether you're using items or not. And as I say, that's not just exclusively to toys. If you get puzzles coming into the house, I would recommend, before they actually get deployed, turn them over and take a Sharpie pen and put a little blue star on the back of each puzzle piece, or a little red triangle on the other puzzle pieces, and so on. When you then find that there are a puzzle, and put the same annotation on the outside of the box, when you then find there are rogue puzzle pieces all over the floor, you can actually sort them out very quickly into into which ones belong with which puzzles. Okay, it could be a complete game changer, because otherwise you're trying to identify which Thomas the Tank Engine puzzle that one is, and which kind of, you know, frozen puzzle piece that one is. So that can actually be quite a good way of doing it. And anybody that's supporting you, whether it's grandparents or so on, they don't need to have the same extensive knowledge about your puzzle collections as you do. The next thing is the kids artwork. Now this normally, I know during coronavirus, a lot of schools are not sending anything home out of school because they're worried about transferring things. So if anything, for a lot of parents, this issue has abated temporarily. But when you're coming to kids artwork, I'd recommend actually having a look at them maybe once a month, and getting your child, as soon as they're old enough to start having an opinion, which is pretty young actually. I've dealt with 3-year-olds that know exactly what they want. Have them select their favorite piece, and you can actually take a photo of them with their favorite pieces, and you're capturing what they look like and what they're wearing and what their hair was doing at the time that they created this project. And you don't necessarily have to keep hold of every single piece of creative work that comes home from school or nursery. Okay, and then obviously at the end of each term you can work with your kids to select their top 5, and at the end of each year kind of whittle it down so you're staying kind of within a manageable quantity. But again, try and create a zone for kids artwork, and if you've got a finite amount of space, it teaches you to cherry pick the favorites, or the, you know, the priority ones within that space. All right, so next up we have piles of clothes. So there's a few little grins coming across on the cameras there. So piles of clothes. Has anybody heard of Marie Kondo, the Japanese decluttering expert? She has a show on Netflix that came out a couple of years ago and sent things slightly viral. I will confess, I don't adhere to all of her techniques for dealing with clothes, but there are some that I think work really well. And that's when you are dealing with clothes, I do recommend pulling out everything, and I mean everything, and putting it on the bed, or if it has to be the floor, kind of putting it all into one area so that you can actually ascertain what you have. Then go through and categorize what you have into piles, not the sort that need hemorrhoid cream. And you'll actually have one category, deal with one category at a time. So you're categorizing into trousers, tops, dresses, skirts, gym gear, accessories, outdoor coats, whatever it may be, and create the piles. What you'll be able to do is you do one category at a time, and it actually, by bringing it all together, you'll be able to see where you are prone to kind of over accumulating certain things. I have worked with clients who have had 28 blue and white striped Breton tops, for example, or I had another client who had over 90 t-shirt tops, and her argument for not decluttering them massively was that she had a colicky baby at the time. She said, okay, you might be able to wear 7 t-shirts a week. She's like, I can, you know, get through 3 in a day. So I said, okay, well, let's do the calculations. So we whittled her down to kind of nearer 50, and she felt okay that she would manage with that and a washing machine, but knowing that she could further review it once the baby had gone through colicky stage and wasn't going to be, you know, decorating her clothes on a regular basis. So when you start seeing kind of how many you've got, you'll realize when you've got duplications. And then what my challenge to you would be is to see what sparks joy. Now, for a lot of us, it's me included here, I found it hard to sort of buy into this spark joy idea. So I'm not sure if people will remember, but back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, there was a TV show with Timmy Mallet, and he used to have an inflatable hammer, and he would have 2 contestants, and it was a word association game, and he would stand in the middle and he would say, right, the word is dog, and then the 2 contestants had to bounce off each other and come up with words very, very quick fire round. They weren't allowed to repeat the same words, and they couldn't go completely off on a tangent. There had to be some sort of connection. I've actually found this works really well with dealing with clothes. If you can't sort of tune into the sort of spiritual level of touching your clothes and feeling whether they spark joy or not, turn it into a game and play Mallet's Mallet with it effectively. So you actually, I do this quick fire round and I'll pull out an item and say, right, how do you feel about that? First 3 words. And what's really interesting is those first 3 words are actually likely to be what you're thinking at a subconscious level. So if they are great, comfortable, confident, sexy, whatever, if they're positive words, it's justified a place back in your wardrobe. You can put it back in your wardrobe, okay? If the first words that you're kind of coming up with without thinking actively are tatty, frumpy, too old, too young, whatever, these are slightly negative connotations, and you will be thinking those, or uncomfortable, pinches a lot, kind of, you know, whatever it may be. You'll be thinking that each time you go to wear that, and a little thing will go off at a subconscious level and go, just leave that one where it is. So actually, it's not really adding any value. That's not to say that we all need to look shit hot on a stick all the time, and that we can't have any kind of slightly run down clothes and all the rest of it. If they're baggy and comfortable and you feel kind of hunkered down and cozy on a winter's evening, great, that's okay. It doesn't mean that we have to kind of just like throw out anything that's got a little bit of wear and tear to it. But just be aware of the words that come immediately to mind, because those will be the words that you actually are thinking at a subconscious level. And that might be why you're not wearing some of the clothes. As you review each category, we said the spark joy, then divide into the keep, donate, and ditch. Okay, I will come on later to some of the suggestions on where we can go with the stuff that's leaving your homes, especially with the kind of slight strange circumstance we're in at the moment. And one of the tricks I do use is actually what I call the hanger trick. So usually you have your clothes and you have your wardrobe and you hang your clothes in this direction and you pull the things out when you need them. What I would suggest is, once you've got your emptied wardrobe, because it's all currently on your bed right now, is to actually hang the clothes the other way around. Now, this seems illogical, but the pointy bit is then pointing towards you. When you go to wear the clothes and you've washed them and kind of they go back into circulation, you do it the usual way and you hang it that way round. After 3, 6, 12 months, whatever you want to give yourself as a review period, there will be still some hangers that are pointing at you slightly accusingly to say, you haven't worn me. Now, this is quite a good indicator of which clothes you think you're wearing, but you're not. Now, it may be that the clothes that are still pointing at you are very much for special occasions, you know, weddings, funerals, christenings, whatever, bar mitzvahs, you know, and we have got reasons right now in particular not to be going to those kind of events. We also go through phases in our lives where everybody seems to get married in the same 2-year period, and then you have a kind of complete lull of those sort of events, okay? It doesn't mean to say that you would necessarily throw out all of them just because they've got the hangers that way, but it will be an indicator, because there will be certain items that I'll call which are much more everyday, or ones that you would have given credit if I'd have tested you and challenged you. And you said, oh yeah, I wear that. And then you've got the evidence after 3, 6 or 12 months that maybe you aren't wearing it anymore. So that's kind of a practical way of just assessing whether your truth is the truth, okay? And then the other thing for maximizing space is the idea of filing, not piling. Now, what I mean by that, and again, if anybody has watched Marie Kondo's Netflix show, you'll know, but if you haven't, it's about, rather than having drawers or shelves with everything piled up like it's beautiful for a retail store, you always inevitably want then something that's, you know, penultimate from the bottom, and when you go to pull it out, it disrupts the whole thing. And unless you've had a career in retail to be able to kind of do this kind of in your sleep and get it all back again, it leaves things looking disheveled and kind of messier. So what I recommend is drawers, or creating drawers on shelves by using kind of some of these sort of storage boxes like you get from IKEA. And then if I show you, this is what I mean by filing, not piling. So you've effectively, let's see if I can do this in reverse and it behave for me. when you go to pull something out, especially when it's on the level and not angled for the camera, right? You pull out what you need and everything else still stays as is. So you're pulling out the pair of shorts that you want to wear, and kind of everything else stays as is. And if you imagine that to be in a drawer, you're looking down and can see exactly what you've got. You don't lose stuff at the back of the cupboard either, because you've actually created a makeshift pull-out drawer. So even if you don't have drawers, you can create drawers on your shelves. That sort of makes sense. So that's filing, not piling. Right, okay. Piles of things to do. This one is my personal Achilles heel. And what I'm still learning this as well, folks, so kind of, you know, bear with me. But what I'd recommend is we quite often call things a to-do list. And by that, what we do is we actually put everything that we think we need to do. Okay, now that makes it kind of quite daunting and insurmountable quite a lot of the time. So I prefer to nickname it a brain dump. So get things out of your head, call it a brain dump. Do not call it a to-do list. That is just an area for you to capture all of the things that bounce around your head that you think you need to do at some stage. Then your actual daily to-do list should really not have more than 3 things on it. If you do all 3 things and you're on fire, we all have those days and they're amazing when we're in flow, grab another 3 off the brain dump list and go for it. I'm not going to restrict you to just 3 things in a day, because that would just, you know, doesn't make sense. But actually pick your top 3 priorities. The word priorities as a plural is already a bit of a misnomer, because it didn't used to exist as a plural word until, I think it's, trying to remember, it's about the 1940s. We suddenly went from priority singular to multiple priorities. So these 3 things are the most important things that you need to get done. And as I say, you can always grab more from the brain dump list, but don't kind of unnerve yourself before you get started. Breaking down the project into more bite-sized pieces so that the tasks are not kind of plan an 18th birthday party, kind of try to actually make it into sort of more manageable bite-sized pieces so you can feel like you're winning along the way. Before you dialed in, we were talking about somebody writing a book and they've actually broken it down into 5,000 words, 10,000 words, 15,000 words, so that they've got those like milestones along the way and make it manageable. Chipping away at tasks. If you've got 15 minutes before you have to jump on a call or go out or have got an appointment and so on, try and chip away at something. It's still 15 minutes towards the bigger goal. I quite often get stuck on this myself and think, all right, I need a 3-hour window to get that done. And trying to find a 3-hour window is just, it's a bit like trying to find rocking horse poo. It's going to be hard at times, okay? If not always. Being very selective with your time. I'm retraining myself on this as well. I quite often have been guilty of saying, I don't have enough time to ... And in fact, I think, one of the posts on the Facebook group for Greenwich Training was, I don't have enough time to, but we'd have time to watch The Crown, for example. In fact, rather than saying I don't have enough time, it's I don't make enough time, because we need to recognize we do have choices, and we don't always make wise ones, okay? So, for example, mine is I never find time to scrapbook. Well, actually, I do. I have a choice. And if I'm given a choice with my time, I'd rather go out on a new, exciting adventure with people and company than stay at home scrapbooking and cataloguing an old adventure. Because although that would be lovely when I'm in a rocking chair, right here, right now, I am making a choice that I want to go on another adventure or have another experience rather than scrapbooking a previous one. So actually, it's not that I never find time to scrapbook or kind of I don't have time to scrapbook. I'm choosing not to. And I think recognizing that choice is quite an important step in the journey. The other thing that I think, yeah, there we go. Sorry, didn't even realize I clicked on a button then. The other thing is recognizing that your to-do list will never be a clean slate. It took me to a few years ago, and I was walking along by the Thames, and I was observing how the Thames water kind of, you know, has neaps and kind of ebbs and flows and kind of has higher tides and lower tides. And I realized that basically our to-do lists are pretty much like the River Thames. We're never going to have a completely dry riverbed. So if you're not good at being able to schedule in relaxation or unwind or self-care until you've got through your to-do list, you are going to be chasing your tail forever. And it's really important to actually recognize that with the ebbs and flow of a tide, there'll be sometimes when the to-do list is enormous and really, really super high and overwhelming, and there'll be other times when it's much lower and manageable. But it's going to keep, every time you clear it down, another tide is going to come in with other stuff. And so actually recognizing that ebb and flow and making sure you still schedule time for relaxation, I think is really important. I have got a lot better since I had that realization, but I still tend to be a bit of a workaholic. All right, so remedies for your piles. I'm conscious of the time, so remedies for your piles. I'm happy to send some of these out kind of afterwards if we go through it too quickly. So selling tends to be the first port of call, because we all actually have, we all are aware that we've actually got kind of, you know, we've invested in something, and therefore we want to actually try to get some of that back. So there are various ways. If you're going to give selling a try, I say feel free, go for it, but also be conscious that your time has a value as well. So, and you need to have a plan B. So I'm just going to whiz these up so you can see the kind of the options. Things like Gumtree, Nextdoor, Facebook Marketplace has been a firm favorite for me with my refurbishment, both for buying and selling. Pre-loved Shpock and eBay if you're happy to post things out. If you've got designer clothing and accessories, there's places like, and these are just some of the examples, there's a huge number out there. Vinted, Vestiaire Collective, Rebel, hardly ever worn it. There's a company called Vintage Cash Cow. You're not going to get the top dollar rates, but equally you don't have to go to car boot sales and sell it all yourself as well and things. So there's vintage jewelry, medals, retro toys and things like that from Vintage Cash Cow. And what you do, again, like with We Buy Books, Ziffit and Zapper, you can you box it up and print out a label and send it off, and then get, you know, you get it assessed. The last ones, the last three, actually, although some of them We Buy Books, it's deceptive. They have now expanded into CDs and DVDs as well. And you can get the app and you just zap the barcodes or the ISBN numbers of books, and it will tell you whether they're accepting those or not. Don't expect huge amounts, but if you're watching Strictly Come Dancing and kind of half paying attention to that, you can be zapping and you might get 10, 15, 20 quid. If you've got, they're not so strong on the sort of Jamie Oliver cookbooks that every household had, but if you've got kind of specific, I know I had a client and she had a lot of books that were all about like quite specifically embroidery techniques or kind of craft type manuals and things, and those were more unique, and so we actually got over £200 like by scanning and sending those ones off. So it depends on what you have in your collection. Donating, there's no such thing as things being too good for donation or too good for charity shops. A lot of charity shops do have designer arms now and are selling stuff online as well to reach a larger market. But for clothing and accessories, there are a number. If you've got corporate wear, Dress for Success, SmartWorks, and Suited and Booted, which is the gents version, they actually help people who've fallen on hard times to give them an outfit for an interview, and they give them interview training and then send them for an interview. And if they land the job, they get a capsule wardrobe then of 5 outfits to get them through a working week. So if you have any corporate wear stuff, those are great avenues. Smalls for All, if you've got gently used bras and or underwear, that kind of new underwear for kids or adults, then you can post those off to Smalls for All. They're based up in Scotland, and they just have got bigger and bigger. It started in somebody's garage and now it's kind of, they've had to move premises. So do double check their latest address on their website if you're going to do that, because there are a lot of things circulate on social media and it's their old address that they've had to upgrade from. Refashion are a company who are taking, you can order an envelope kind of on from them and fill it with clothes and send it off, and they raise money for breast cancer care. And then you can actually, when the shops are open, H&M, M&S, John Lewis and various others are now offering initiatives. They do clothing rewards like £5 vouchers or 20% off, etc. They change the setups, but these are some of the examples where they are actually doing things to try and encourage you to bring your old clothes back. It doesn't even always have to be H&M's clothes back to H&M, for example. Then toiletries and cosmetics. I often suggest starting with the bathroom because it's the least emotional, sentimental place for many people. Beauty banks have now teamed up with Superdrug. That's if you've got new and unopened toiletries. And then if you've got empty makeup packaging, then Maybelline has recently launched a makeup recycling program, and you can go on their website and see where you can drop off kind of old mascara ones and small kind of pots of makeup. Toiletries Amnesty is actually has got a whole list of everything in our area. Kind of, you can put your postcode in and see who's collecting, and that can be a mixture of whether they accept. It depends on each recipient, shall we say, as to whether they'll accept part used toiletries or whether it has to be brand new. But there is one kind of very local to us, Greenwich Mutual Aid, which was set up during coronavirus. They're accepting donations on a Sunday morning. So that's one of the ones, but you can have a look and see kind of if any of them are closer to you for on the Toiletries Amnesty site. And then household items, there's various apps that you can use, and so Gone for Good app, FreeCycle, Freegal and Olio are all apps. Men's Shed is a great initiative. I don't know that they're operating at the moment, but they actually provide an environment for chaps to come along to who wouldn't normally put themselves into a socializing environment, shall we say, and they give them projects to work with, so you can actually donate kind of household items and or tools and paint and supplies like that, and it kind of gives an environment for a sense of community. So the guys come along and work on projects and have a sense of purpose and company in the process. Electricals, some of the providers, some of the charity shops, I know that Emmaus in West Norwood do pat testing, and I have a feeling, but I forgot to double check whether Emmaus, the homeless charity in Greenwich, they're all franchise type setup, whether they can also do the electrical testing to be able to accept those. Right. Recycling and ditching, you've got your council, local council recycling. You guys are lucky insofar as that I have to, in Southwark, I have to book in a slot with my local recycling centre, but the one in Nathan Way is open, and you don't need an appointment. So they do just clean it once a day from 11:30 to 12:30, so don't turn up at that point. You usually need to show ID to show that you're actually in the catchment. And then they also have teamed up with Greenwich and Bexley Community Hospice, and so if you have a bike that has seen better days kind of and can be repaired, they are doing those up, as well as some other items as well. A bit like I was saying with the men's sheds, you can actually they'll do some doer-upper projects and sell them off in the hospice shop as well. Yep, we've got that. This is one to keep an eye out for. It's not at Greenwich just yet, but IKEA have just started a furniture buyback initiative they're trialling at the moment up in the Scotland stores, but I don't think it's come down to Greenwich, and obviously not at this moment in time while we're in lockdown, but they are starting to buy back IKEA furniture to try and reduce their impact on the planet, so you could get some credit towards your next purchases at IKEA. And in normal circumstances, there are things called swish events, which if you haven't heard of them, they are clothing swaps where you turn up with 5 or 10 items and you get tokens to then go and swap for something else. So it's something that's secondhand but is new to you. And those are great to keep an eye out for in future when we're back in a world beyond lockdown and COVID restrictions. And then the council doorstop can also do bulk waste collections, and again Greenwich is pretty affordable. It's £10 per large item or £3 per bag of waste. They were currently booked up until mid-November, so any day now they should be opening up slots again if anybody's got any bulk waste that they want to get done. Right, 2 seconds and we will do working from home. So we've now all had to adjust. It's the new office, the new school, the new chilling out space. So again, this idea about kind of creating zones and trying to have, if you can find a dedicated area that you associate with work and create and set up, that's fantastic. I do appreciate that a lot of people haven't got that luxury of whether it's a second bedroom or a nook kind of, and so actually trying to kind of create spaces within your home to be able to work productively A lot of people have sort of adapted and actually created things like I call it affectionately a business in a box. And if you are either running your own business or now working from home, if you actually have a box that is all of the stuff that's the equivalent stuff of what you would have had in your pedestal if you were going into an office at work, and for example, you bring that out, you work with it during the working day, and you can put a lid on it at the end of the day and put it to one side, so that then that can then be reclaimed as the dining table for a family meal, or kind of you can actually relax and feel that you've stepped away from work. So rather than you physically being able to step away from work, you've sort of contained work in a box and put it to one side, throw a blanket over it, deny it until the next morning kind of thing. I'd recommend trying to divert the time that you would have been spending commuting, rather than it bleeding into an extended working day, which happens to a lot of us. See if you can redefine that. And if you said that, well, that was half an hour each way, or that was an hour each way, that you gain yourself an hour to 2 hours each day for me time, whatever that might be. It might be that you've always been meaning to learn a language. It might be that you want to get into podcasts. It might be that you want to go out for, for walks or working out. Try and rechannel that time into that, rather than it bleeding into kind of the working day. You may have to review and redefine your spaces, albeit temporarily, while we are in this ongoing sort of phase. I know a lot of offices have already announced they're not going to even be opening up till March or July or September next year, which is quite a long stretch. So you may have to concede and redefine some of your spaces temporarily. The other thing I'd say is defining your boundaries, both physical and time-wise. So as we touched on, kind of the trying not to let your working day merge the whole way through. It can be very easy to, because you just think, I'll just jump on and I'll just do this and just do that. So one of the tips I have coming up on the next slide is about setting alarms to try and help you be aware of how long you're spending on things. So what I'd say is take control of the aspects that you can take control of, which include your routine. You can choose to create a routine, and I liken it to having a skeleton, and you can flesh it out more as the week unfolds, but try to create the basic structure. I found this very hard when I first went to self-employed, because I suddenly had 24/7 available, and actually I kept it all available because I wanted clients. And instead of saying yes to social invites or kind of creating any structure or saying that I could do this or do that, I was holding it all ready for clients. And I think when we're in this sort of very strange world that we're in, it's quite tempting to kind of just drift and kind of go along with things, and kind of we all feel a bit flattened at times and kind of discombobulated. But if you take control of the things you can take control of, like your routine, then actually you start feeling better about the bits you can feel better about. Okay, so some of the basics, like I'm saying, shower and getting dressed. Now Sally's going to laugh at this because I was behind schedule on this when I spoke to her earlier today, but actually the difference between getting up and trying to keep some sense of normality, especially if you've been furloughed and all of your routine has gone out the window, you need to take control of that and create that routine for yourself. And if you're working from home, I know it myself, I feel more in the zone and more productive if I've actually got dressed and got ready to work for the day, rather than, you can always answer emails in pajamas and so on, but actually there's a psychology behind it, and there's kind of a focus. And I definitely find that the days that I actually have got dressed and got showered and dressed and pretended as though I'm going off to the office kind of in a normal way, I've actually been much more productive and focused, because I'm sort of dressing and feeling the part, so to speak. Okay. Planning it out the night before, especially if you're not good in the mornings, kind of will give you something to get up and hit the ground running, rather than being a bit fuzzy around the edges for the first couple of hours of the day and suddenly you've got derailed because other people's priorities have come in on top of yours and you've just sort of got sidetracked on that. The planning out, the bit about life in colour is, as I mentioned earlier, kind of, you might find it easier to help keep the work-life balance if you've got things colour-coded in your diary, so that you know what is work-related, what's personal life, and if you have any other commitments like community things or volunteer, that another colour as well. Again, just to make sure you're keeping things in balance and not giving and giving and giving out in that sector without actually spending enough time on your personal stuff or your business. What I've got here is identify your rocks. If you may have heard of this, Stephen Covey talks about having kind of rocks in a jar or a glass. You need to identify your rocks are your most important things. And actually, I have this jar on the side of here, which actually is there as a reminder for me to make sure I'm always thinking about what my rocks are. If you fill your time with sand, all the little bitty bits that pop up and kind of other people's dramas and dilemmas, you're going to fill your jar with sand, and then there's no space for the pebbles and the rocks, which are actually the big important things to you. What you need to do is put your rocks in first, then you can allow for some pebbles as distractions, and finally you can put all the bitty sand in around it. But otherwise you're not going to have space in your life. You've only got a finite amount of time each day. That's your jar. Now the tennis balls are for when they're to remind me that sometimes balls drop and sometimes they weren't my balls to drop, so I need to let myself off the hook. But if you think of things like your day is a jar, it's a finite amount of space. If you fill it with little bitty bits like sand, you're never going to get your rocks in. So always put the rocks in first. Identify what your rocks are, and they can change. I mean, they can be overarching principles. You know, it may be your family are your fundamental rocks. It may be your partner. It may be your career, whatever it may be. You might have broad reaching rocks for your kind of general life, but each day there'll be something that's maybe more of a focus than another. So try and identify your rocks. Again, we've talked about this, writing it down, kind of getting things out of your head, get that brain dump and get it down. There's a lot of things kind of out there. Various things work for different people. I've got into bullet journaling, and I've been finding that's really useful for kind of jotting stuff down and capturing things in that format. There are things called Kanban or Kanban, depending on who pronounces it, which are, again, it's a bit like an egg timer shape. You have all the things you want to do, so that's like your brain dump. You have your to-do list, which is maybe 2 or 3 of your key activities, and then you have your done, and you move stuff across the board so that you can actually see when you're making progress. And again, if you're quite a visual person, that kind of works well for staying motivated. Alarms as support. There's something called the Pomodoro technique, which is basically based on one of these tomato timers. You set yourself for 25 minutes and then you have a 5-minute break. So you do concentrated activity for 25 minutes, no interruptions, no distractions, and you have a 5-minute break. And that's when you can jump on Facebook or kind of go make a cup of tea, have a comfort break, and then come back and do another 25-minute interval. It's interesting to see how, like, when that alarm goes off every 25 minutes, you're like, wow, how was that 25 minutes if you're in the zone? And we can sometimes find it deceptive how long we spend on certain activities. I would suggest setting a timer for your 5-minute break as well, because if you go onto Facebook and you fall down a rabbit hole, that might be easily 25 minutes and then some. Right, okay. So what next? That was a whistle-stop tour. Hopefully I haven't knackered you all out completely. But what I'd like to do is set yourself a challenge of 3 things. Hopefully there's been, you know, a few things along the way. I'd like you to think about 3 things that you might be able to take away from tonight, or something might have sparked off and kind of you thought of, you know what, I knew that already, but I haven't done it yet. 3 things you want to tackle. So 1 by the end of this week, 1 by the end of lockdown, and 1 by the end of the year. So you've got another 6-ish weeks to do that. Okay. And I have said to Sally earlier, kind of, I'd be more than happy if anybody wants to be held accountable for these 3 tasks. I'm more than happy to kind of liaise with you. We can decide what format would be the best format to do that on. So whether you want to do a WhatsApp group or do it via the Facebook group. If anybody is interested, kind of, and if it's just 1 or 2 people, we can do it 1-to-1. That's not a problem as well. So however you prefer to roll with it. But if you would like to think of 3 things, I'm challenging you. And like we said for Sarah, it may be for unpacking her boxes and seeing what she really still needs and wants and loves. Okay. So I don't know, does anybody want to take part in a challenge? And what format, if you do, what format would it be, would suit you best?
I'm game. I need to probably think about it for a minute about what I'm going to do, but yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I'm game.
We're game.
We're game. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, whatever suits everyone else, just include me in.
All right,
Yeah.
brilliant. That's great. Well, if anybody wants to drop me a line, I will put my contact details up in just a moment. So I think we've barely touched the surface of Shit Club, but hopefully it's given you a few ideas at least, and a little bit of inspiration to tackle your home space. What I normally do is, if anybody would like to connect and needs a hand, kind of after you've started your challenge, if you find you get to a stumbling block, I am doing virtual consultations, which are £45 for the hour, and on that we do a Zoom call like this, but you would walk me through the space or the area that you're having difficulties with, and I can talk you through any kind of stumbling blocks that you're getting on there. I just come up with ideas on the spot there and then. There isn't any kind of teaser things of, giving you a hint of something, but not unless you kind of commit to any more. Some people have found that the virtual consultation gives them what they need. It's kind of, cleared the blockers, and then I take that as a compliment if they can go ahead and tackle their space then. If not, you can actually then team up for a session on site, and I am £65 an hour, and it's a minimum 3 hours, because I do find it takes a bit of getting into the groove and getting the cogs turning, the decluttering and organising cogs turning. At the moment, we are doing the on-site sessions. I can come out to people because this work I can't do from home. I can do a certain amount of virtual support. But if any clients are in need and comfortable, then it's with face coverings and keep the windows open to try and do our bit to reduce the chance of transmission. Equally, if people would rather wait, that's not a problem at all. So what I'd like to offer is, if anybody does want to kind of team up, I'm happy to offer £50 off your first on-site session if you quote GT for Greenwich Training 50 anytime before the end of the year. So if you book in a consultation, a virtual consultation, and then want to go ahead with the on-site one, I will happily knock £50 off for any members of Greenwich Training. So that is it. I have got my keep in touch details, so if you do want to reach out, feel free to get in touch with me that way. And I'm also happy for anyone who hasn't keeled over by the wayside. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to field a Q&A for anybody who needs some further input on any areas.
I've just got a really quick question around sort of clothes, because I'm quite a keen shopper. Much more so before this year happened, but I sort of find when I go shopping, lots of things spark joy.
Okay, yeah.
And then I find myself thinking, afterwards, what can I wear this with, or what can I where can I wear this? Like, do you have any little tips that you would think about, like in terms of like a 1 in 1 out policy, or maybe thinking of a certain amount of times that you could wear the item before you buy it?
Yeah, so there are tricks on that. So definitely 1 in 1 out policy is a great one. So once you've reviewed, so at that point, if you actually loaded stuff back and justified its position, it's come up with positive adjectives, or it's sparked joy and it's gone back into your wardrobe. The other thing is that actually you can do style and colour consultations, so that you can actually identify what colours and what styles suit you best. And then it helps when you go into a store, because you can actually look around and scan and go, yeah, none of these colours are the right colours for me, I can walk out again. And so that can actually help. It is another investment, but actually you can she's Greenwich based actually, who I did it with, Emily West from House of Colour, and she actually went through it with me and helped identify. It's hilarious. You end up with all of these like swatches of fabric over you, and I know I look a bit yellow in the light because I haven't quite got the lighting right in this room at night, but effectively different colours will actually bring you to life or make you look ill. And so actually she goes through with all of these different swatches of colour and says, you can see the difference. And it's interesting because they use this in the acting fields as well. If they needed an actor to look unwell and kind of on, you know, with a diagnosis of something, they'll actually put them in a colour that's not becoming of their skin complexion and style, and it actually makes them look kind of more jaded and more unwell. Some people have been known to use this to pull a sickie at work, have knowing what their colours are, have actually then gone into work, gone, I don't feel very well at all today, and the boss goes, oh no, you don't look good at all, go home, you know, and they've just dressed to play the part. So that is a way of doing it, and you might find that that's a good investment to help just hone your shopping skills kind of in future. The next stage of it after colours is actually your style, and so kind of there are various different styles, and she works with you about your personality, the way you react to the world and things, and really digs deep. I mean, I was in tears at points because I didn't realise it was going to be quite such a self-awareness exercise, but actually she, you know, works with you to identify what style suits you most, and I have always felt a bit difficult trying to be feminine, and my definition of feminine was very kind of lacy, kind of voluminous, big curls, etc., kind of thing, the things that I thought were stereotypical female, kind of lots of makeup or things like that. And I was going, I'm not really a girly girl, I can't really do this. And it turns out that actually, because my style and my personality, I'm actually far more what was the word? I've had a brain blank, but effectively it means slightly elfish, and kind of almost like a bit like a Peter Pan quality, that there's a like almost childlike quality to me, and that always will, even if I hit 70, and I should actually be embracing that and kind of bringing out that playful side, not trying to always be. I had a corporate background, so I was always very classical dressed and kind of would actually try to conform. And you can still do that, but you bring in different elements that show that little bit of rebellious or show that bit of personality. And she, you know, she said, you know, she's told me that I'd be a lot more feminine. I'd embrace my feminine side a lot more if I was actually in slightly more androgynous clothing, funnily enough. So rather than trying to kind of, you know, fit a round peg into a square hole or vice versa, it's about learning kind of what suits you the most. So anyway, that was a sales pitch for Emily, but that actually does help on that front. The other thing is if you're seeing something and you're just buying it because it's in the sale, really ask yourself kind of whether you would buy full price. Would you be prepared to invest full price at it? The other thing you can do is have a look and try and ascertain the price per wear. So if it's an item that you're going to actually use very regularly, so for example, if it's a winter coat and we're heading for the winter, you're going to wear it X number of days, you can actually do some maths and go, right, I'm probably going to wear this for at least 60 or 90 days. If it's something that's, you know, £180, that's up to £2 a wear just for this winter. If it's a good quality product, you're going to also get to wear it the winter after and the winter after that. So actually try to kind of work out a bit of a kind of price per wear and then say, is that worth it? If you're spending £180 on something that's just for one day for a friend's wedding or something like that, then you may not justify the same outlay. Yeah. So you can try and think of it in a kind of bit of a methodical calculation point, you know, way of looking at it. And the other thing is there are a lot of places now that are actually starting to rent out outfits. So when we go back to slightly more normality and we want to go out, and if it's things that are special occasions, you can actually hire an outfit, hire a dress for the event, and then send it back. So you're not physically buying it or having to store it. So there are different ways of trying to keep some of the volume under control. But yeah, definitely one in, one out would be a very easy one once you've done your initial blitz declutter, and then deciding, right, that's a comfortable amount for me to have enough variety for me to, you know, be able to do what I need to do. It doesn't mean you can never go shopping again. And if you really enjoy it, that's fine, but it's a case of just keeping it manageable.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine. Has anyone else got any questions, guys?
Oh, that was really interesting though. Thank you.
Good. I hope it helped.
I've got to get tidying now.
Okay, you don't have to start tonight, Robin, okay? But, you know, I did give you to the end of the week. It's not by midnight, okay, on the first challenge.
It does make me feel really like positive about it though, because we've got this like our kids are lucky enough to have a whole cupboard of art stuff. We call it the art cupboard. It's just a dumping ground, isn't it? It's just become...
I actually started sorting it yesterday, and so I was like, don't do that now. I'm like, no, I'm going to start it.
I think that's going to be one of our tasks, is the art cupboard.
Oh, I'm doing the art cupboard. I'm well into this stuff. I love it. But yeah, if you don't go to bed soon, Robin, then you'll get in trouble with the other Katherine for not getting enough sleep. So yeah, don't go tonight.
What's really great about this is that I'm the main thing I want to do is the shed, which actually technically isn't my remit. So it's helped more than one person in this household.
Well, making friends. I love it. Awesome.
So you're nominating someone else to tackle that, yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, it's been
so much.
lovely to meet you all, and you've got my contact information, so if there's anything that you think of afterwards, feel free to reach out. And as I say, kind of I think we've got Ian, Sally and Vicky are definitely up for the challenge, so we could set up a little mini group to see how
Dave was up for doing his wardrobe as well.
Yes,
he
David
put in the
said,
comments, so Dave's had to shoot off, but yeah.
Oh, did he? Okay, I haven't been able to see the comments in this.
No, that's all right, don't worry. Yeah, no, he mentioned that as well, so yes, a few takers there.